give an example of IPR, or interpersonal process recall, and we're going to watch a clip here in a moment of Max. And Max is seeking counseling with his therapist, Julia, regarding some marital difficulties. And this is their first session. So take a few minutes here and watch the clip of Max.
Okay, Max, I understand that you have some concerns that you'd like to discuss today. So whenever you're ready, I'm happy for you to voice whatever it is that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, well, I suppose the bottom line is that I'm having some difficulties in my relationship with my wife. And I'm very uncertain about actually being here, and it's a bit embarrassing talking about these things with a stranger.
Yeah, so you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable discussing such personal information with an outsider?
Yes, it is. I'm a bit awkward. I was brought up to solve your problems yourself.
Yeah,
and you don't go outside the family, you don't take your problems to strangers. And I would normally do, but also I realise now that given the depth of the problem, that I also need to get another perspective on things.
Okay, all right. I guess what I generally say to people when they first come along is that it's not uncommon to feel quite uncomfortable talking to an outsider about such personal information, and even though I can't predict exactly how you're going to feel and how things will go for you today, I do know that in the past a lot of other people have actually felt quite uncomfortable to begin with, but as they've been able to talk and get things off their chest, they actually feel quite relieved. So you might find that as we spend more time together, that you're more comfortable in this environment too.
Well, I hope it works out that way.
Yeah, we'll see how we go.
Well, it was a friend of mine who'd been involved in counselling previously who suggested that this is what I should attempt to do anyway. See where we go.
Okay. And you were saying before as well that that normally you like to solve things yourself and work things out yourself, and I think it's quite a balanced perspective to be looking at how you're going to resolve things yourself, and also to get an outside perspective as well. So I can see lots of benefit that can come from that dual approach.
Well, I haven't succeeded in doing it by myself, so
yeah,
it's worth a go.
Yeah, so perhaps we can shed some light on some helpful approaches for you. Yeah. Okay. I guess to help me understand your situation, it'd be helpful if you could talk a little bit about what's been going on for you and what's brought you along.
Well, I suppose things have just deteriorated in my relationship with my wife, Angelina. We've been married 11 years now, and we've got 2 kiddies, John who's 9 and Jackie who's 7.
Right.
And she's very busy in her job, and she's always been I suppose a bit of a control freak.
Right.
She likes things to be just so. And occasionally she would, what I would call it, lose the plot, and she'd yell at me and abuse me, but in the past that was never a problem because we could sit down and talk about it, and she'd recognise that she'd probably gone over the top and whatever. But lately it's really just gotten out of hand, and she's not controlling her anger or temper, and it really concerns me now because I think it's starting to affect the kids.
Right, okay. So it sounds like, to begin with, she might often become quite angry, but she would settle down and you could resolve things, but of late it's become a lot more volatile, and she's become more explosive, and you're really concerned about the impact on yourself and the children.
Yeah, I mean, the kids are young, and I mean, John, he's a boy and he seems to be handling things okay. But you're always uncertain as to really how things are affecting him. Jackie's only 7, as I said, and she's a lot more sensitive, and she's not really handling things too well at all. Yeah. And that's really starting to put a lot of extra concern to me.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like you've got a lot of concerns about both the kids, and John's probably handling it okay outwardly, even though obviously he's feeling it. But Jackie, you're particularly concerned about because she's quite delicate, and you're worried about that impact.
Yeah.
And all of you are walking around on eggshells at the moment, just waiting for some kind of explosion to happen. Does that sound right?
Well, I'm concerned about the kids, but I'm concerned about the marriage. It's important to me to do what you can to keep things together, because that's better for the kids.
Yeah.
But if I had to single out one major concern, it would be probably for Jackie,
Okay.
because there's been a few incidents lately where the kids have been exposed in.
So I'd like to ask, what are some IPR leads that you might consider if you were supervising Julia and had watched the tape of this session? Some possible examples based on this clip. How did it make you feel when Max said that it was embarrassing to be talking about marital issues with a stranger? Or was Max giving you any clues as to how he was feeling about his wife? And I think you could go deeper here than just Max's body language, although depending on her level of autonomy, her level of cognitive complexity, she may pick up on his nonverbals, or she may pick up more on the content of his discussion about his wife and his story. You might also ask, well, what did you want to tell Max when he shared that he was brought up to solve his own problems? And kind of get into that. How did that feel for you, given that this was your chosen profession? So you can have, again, some very rich discussions about these different topics, and using these leads in a practical way to help your supervisee with his or her development. A few more supervision activities that you might consider. I mentioned this before, but to tape or transcribe a session. This is one of the activities that usually results in a lot of grumbles, especially because it's a very time-consuming process to sit in front of the computer, have the supervisee listen to the tape over and over and over again and type word for word what the client said, what the counselor said, what the client said, what the counselor said. However, it is actually one of the most effective tools. And also with that transcription, you could look at adherence to theoretical perspective. Again, we're applying theory using these evidence-based techniques. Some supervisees decide to invest in some of the software that will go ahead and transcribe it, and then they go and supplement and check it. So it depends on their level of commitment, I suppose. Another activity might be to write a weekly reaction paper to their session, their work, to track their progress towards their supervision goals. And then a summative paper at the end, describing, maybe taking all the different components of training, the clinical interventions, the personal explorations, the consultation, the implementation of ethics, the adherence to cultural diversity, and synthesizing those into a final summative paper. And one final activity that I would recommend, and I think this goes along with my mantra of working smarter instead of necessarily harder, and that is to have the supervisee write their own reference letter at the end of the experience. Because you can pretty much guarantee that they are going to request a letter for future employment purposes. And having them write their own letter and having them detail what were their work behaviors, what did they do in this clinical experience, what are their strengths, what are their areas for improvement. It has them self-assess so that they can look at themselves through someone else's eyes. And of course, they send you the letter, and of course you read it, amend it, add to it, However, it does help you reflect and helps the supervisee reflect on the experience and what their goals and that they met and what future goals they may have. So kind of a little trick of the trade at the end of that experience. So I want to talk also at this point about some of the supervision basics. And in this section, I'm going to talk about first the idea of becoming a supervisor. Some of you may have already been doing supervision. Some of you may be considering, do I want to add this to my professional repertoire? So some of the benefits of becoming a supervisor, and some of these are related to taking on an intern, but maybe to have an extra set of hands to do some of the work. It provides you job variety, whether you're doing clinical work or administrative work. The providing clinical supervision adds to your own variety. It keeps you up to date because you do, when you have an intern or a supervisee coming to you for information, it keeps you up to date on what are questions going on, what are the current techniques being used, what does the research say about how to address this clinical issue. With interns, it's a possibility for screening for future hires, that this is a way to basically have an extended interview of someone's work behaviors. Some see it as a way to give back to the profession, a way of paying it back, since we've all, at some point to get to where we are today, have had clinical supervision. And it is definitely a method of personal and professional growth. It is such a way to expand your wisdom and your knowledge and kind of support what you know and how you do it. There are some limitations in that it is time consuming. At times. You are going to be basically taking on the training and monitoring of another person. There is the liability that comes with your legal and ethical responsibilities to monitor the supervisee. Of course, more responsibilities with regards to documentation and paperwork. Again, documentation of your own supervision sessions. There is the cost of liability insurance, which I'll talk about here in a few moments. And it can be challenging, which is usually a good thing for us. But just remembering that it is a way to pass on your professional wisdom and experience, which is really invaluable as we train a new generation of clinicians. So some of the basics, and we're going to go over each of these one by one. We're going to talk about expectations in supervision, the supervision contract, documentation requirement, accordance with ethical and legal bodies, attendance to culture and diversity, and at the end, evaluation and gatekeeping. So as we talk about expectations, we need to review at the onset of supervision both your own expectations about supervision and your supervisee's expectations. Again, the supervisee comes to supervision from possibly no experience whatsoever, not knowing what to expect from the supervisory process. And they move from low autonomy and high anxiety to higher levels of independence and skill. And so you are going to provide an orientation to supervision to the supervisees that are in this lower phase, the novice phase, that may not have that experience, but realizing that they're going to change as they gain experience. So we're going to talk about Stoltenberg's IDM, or the Integrated Development Model. And what this model says, this is from Cal Stoltenberg, is that the supervisee is going from this novice professional through the experienced professional phase and then ultimately to the senior professional phase. In fact, when we talk about becoming a supervisor, typically it is the clinicians in the senior professional phase that feel more competent to provide clinical supervision. So I want you to consider where the supervisee is at as you're providing the supervision, and realizing, asking yourself, how will you conduct supervision with a novice versus a senior professional, because those are going to look different. And to remember that not only of meeting the supervisee where he or she is at, but also allow chances for the supervisee to tolerate ambiguity in order to grow. For example, when a supervisee is coming to supervision and they're very frustrated that they have a completely nonverbal client that refuses to talk, rather than just giving her a list of suggestions and just saying, try this, do this, do this, try to engage her in the process. Help her figure out how to figure it out herself. In other words, where can you go to explore this? Where can you go to find information about nonverbal clients or reluctant or resistant clients? And even focusing on the personalization. What would be the worst thing that could happen if the client continues to refuse to talk? And get her to think through that process and that conceptualization. And remember, this is not a lockstep approach. That's a very predictable progression from novice to senior professional. It's going to differ from supervisee to supervisee based on their exposure to the clinical issues, based on their life experience, based on their work experience.